Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is David Busby from ANA, and okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is David Busby from ANA, and today's webinar is on bot fraud and how to protect your company and your brands. This is the third in our ongoing series of complimentary webinars on legal and regulatory issues offered by the ANA. Webinars will occur every other month, typically at 1 p.m. Eastern. These webinars will be conducted by industry experts and leading client-side marketers, and will explore topics on the cutting edge of advertising and marketing law. And for our webinar today on bot fraud, we're lucky to have Michael Tiffany joining us. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of WhiteOps, a security company founded in 2013 to break the profit models of cyber criminals. WhiteOps is the leader in the evolving arms race against ad fraud. Previously, Michael was the co-founder of Mission Assurance Corporation, a pioneer in space-based computing that is now a part of Recursion Ventures. Michael is also a technical fellow, a lifetime appointment of Critical Asset Labs, a DARPA-funded cybersecurity research lab. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over now to Michael.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I would like to bring you all up to speed on what we've learned over the past year about the state of the art in fraud, and why this is such a profitable cybercrime, and in particular how fraud has been able to perpetuate itself despite increasing sophistication in ad buying at the same time that we've seen an increase in sophistication on the part of the cybercriminals who are skimming off of ad campaigns. WhiteOps is a security company, and as mentioned in the intro, we're a different kind of security company, part of a wave now of new companies coming up that are not focused on prophylactics. We're not trying to make computers harder to break into. Instead, we're focused on breaking the actual incentive models of the cyber criminals, which pretty much means following the money. And what we found is that the number one monetizer, the big way to make money when you break into regular people's computers, so not when you're doing, not when you're breaking into banks or nation states, but just harming everyday consumers, turns out to be ad fraud, which was a big surprise to us. But we found that the cybercriminal arms race, the black market for what we call crimeware, the software that's actually used to make money, has been adapted over the past few years from the cutting edge in bank fraud to ad fraud, which is in some ways a better crime. One of the reasons is that you can exfiltrate literally billions of dollars out of the system in a way that is extremely hard to detect, and that involves far fewer moving parts than robbing banks, which is the number two monetizer of bank fraud, number two monetizer of botnet. This is because no matter how good your technology is as a criminal, no matter how stealthy, when you actually take the money from a bank account, someone tends to notice that the money is missing. Whereas when you succeed at ad fraud, you actually make metrics go up, no one notices, and you don't need international money mules moving the cash across national borders. So we've seen a shift in organized crime that actually repurposes the technology originally designed to do this particular form of digital bank robbery, and applying it to ad flows. When you actually follow the money, what you find is that, of course, it's ANA members, it's advertisers that are pouring money into the top of the funnel, and when you look at how the money gets distributed from the buyers to publishers, and in this particular case to cybercriminals, there's there's quite a bit of middlemen in the way that whose business is to essentially aggregate traffic. And what we found is that the proliferation of bot traffic really alters the way that money flows. In the aggregate, obviously, there's a lot of value we had in online advertising and the purchasing of it. It can work really extraordinarily well, but the ad dollars are in some cases actually going to people who have gone to the trouble of developing real human audiences, and in many cases it's going to the people who most effectively attract bots, and a couple $1 billion is actually just being completely lost. It's the winnings that are going to organized crime, and meanwhile the middlemen that monetize volume, the ad tech companies that make the most money just by undifferentiated volume are also just making money from bot traffic because bots are extraordinarily easy to serve. What we've seen now that we've run across display, video, search, and mobile traffic is in the aggregate double-digit fraud figures. The actual numbers change by campaign and by buying channel, and remarkably also by time. I think that when we started this, we had some early evidence that criminal botnets were making a lot of money in ad fraud, but it was an underexplored area. And I was kind of expecting a kind of, background radiation of bots. Like, we'd find bots here and there, and we were all trying to answer the question for ourselves, how bad is the problem? And I thought that the way to answer that would be with a number, like it's 25% bad, or it's 50% bad, or something like that. And what we found was a much more complicated answer. We found, slicing and dicing the data on a campaign-by-campaign basis, we found some campaigns that were north of, that were 95% bot traffic. So 19 bots for every human, which is unreal. Digging into that a little more and how that campaign was bought, we found that it was actually something of a highly optimized campaign that had been tuned towards the bot traffic because the bots looked like they performed. The bot traffic seemed to engage with the content, and it was hitting the right KPIs. Of course, we've also seen remarkably clean campaigns, especially smaller scale ones, bought through direct relationships with trusted suppliers. And then we've seen a lot of variation in the middle. For example, we've seen a repeated pattern when looking at bot traffic on premium websites, so not criminally operated websites, but rather big websites that are sourcing bot traffic in one way or another, that the bots as a percentage of visitors goes up near the end of the month every month, which is a remarkable pattern. And what it seems to show is that if the numbers are weak, especially in pre-sold inventory in a given month, then site operators sometimes look to turn up the taps for the other relationships that they have that bring in the audience. And the trouble with those deals is that they're often priced on a performance basis, which really means that they're creating a downstream incentive for someone to sell them traffic that's goosed with bots. And that leads to this almost regular cycle now where we expect at the end of the month and then again at the end of the quarter, there's increased bot activity. So it turns out that there's no single number that really encapsulates the whole scene. It's really an active arms race on the part of people like us defending and studying the problem, and the criminal operators themselves who are bringing a lot of sophistication to bear in going undetected. Now, let me talk to you a little about how the bad guys actually make money, because it's much more complicated than you might imagine. The basic model of the crime is where the same people that are operating the botnets that are generating all the bogus traffic that looks like human traffic are also operating a bunch of websites that are just sort of hiding out in the long tail. So, so a criminal operation that makes a few $1 million a year can bring a lot of resources to bear to make very pretty, great-looking, credible-looking mommy blogs, say, that look like they're reaching a highly targeted audience of for a particular kind of consumer. And having set those websites up, you then kind of direct your botnet traffic to them. And the best criminals do not attract a lot of attention. What they'll do is they'll just send enough traffic so that a site makes, say, $10,000 a month, because no one's really policing $10,000 a month checks on the ad sell side. And the way this becomes a multi-million-dollar operation is that you operate, say, 100 of those sites. They all appear as though they're independent, but they're actually all owned by a single botnet operator. And then you have a tidy multi-million-dollar business. But the actual the majority of ad dollars in terms of absolute spending numbers is not being lost to those bogus websites that are hiding out in the long tail. It's instead being lost to the bot traffic that is goosing the numbers of real websites that have real human audiences. And before we arrived, applying the kind of detection technology that we originally developed for banks to this scene, those practices of goosing the numbers were going completely undetected. One of the reasons why they were going completely undetected is that the bot operators are actually undermining the way targeting works on the internet. Because what I mean when I speak about a botnet is a very large number of regular people's computers that have some malware, the criminal payload, the crimeware package, running in the background. These regular people have no idea that their computers have been compromised. And these regular people are browsing around on the internet and they're buying stuff. Well, the botnet operators can read out the contents of all of these regular people's computers, everything that's on their hard drives, and especially the cookies and other metadata that the ad ecosystem uses for targeting. So we've found, and this is one of the most astonishing truths of the state of the art of fraud in online advertising, is that some of the absolutely most sophisticated buying with the best targeting also had the highest levels of fraud, which is just crazily counterintuitive. And the reason is that the bots are clones of the real consumers who own those computers. And there is no well-deployed mechanism across the ad ecosystem that can differentiate between the real person behind the real browser on a given computer and the bot in the background on the same computer. And that insight, that criminal innovation is what turned this ad fraud scene from a tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars kind of criminal scene into a multi-billion one. So the bots are hiding out in the population of well-targeted and actually well-understood consumers. So another way to think about the rise of fraud is to characterize it as really a failure to apply authentication to the identification of people on the internet. Even the big companies that understand and essentially monetize identity, the Googles and Facebooks of the world, are suffering from this problem because, again, the bots can just read out the Facebook cookie. They can read out the Google passwords, and they can apply those credentials to their fake bot traffic. And then when that traffic is being washed through middlemen and ending up at name brands, premium publishers, then everyone really gets duped. I just described the kind of the basic ad fraud model. Now I want to dig into how bots end up on name brand websites that with names that everyone on this presentation would recognize. What we found is that there are many name brand websites that will be, say, 70% human and 30% bot, and they're selling their inventory at very high CPMs because they're the premium, and no one is suspecting that some portion of their traffic might actually be fraudulent. So in many cases, the fraud detectors have actually, in some cases, they've whitelisted this traffic. In other cases, they've actually used it as their learning model for what high-quality traffic looks like. So this means that the bot operators get their bots kind of baked in to everyone's normative models of what internet traffic looks like, which is a great path to money. This was mind-blowing when we first saw this because we're just security guys. And when we first began, we were real ad industry outsiders, and it made absolutely no sense to me that I was seeing high levels of bot traffic on name brand websites of large, in some cases, public companies that are definitely not engaging in black market transactions with criminal botnet operators. But we had the hard data, and the way our system works is that it really produces hard evidence. It's designed to put bank robbers in jail, which makes it different than a lot of other fraud detection techniques that really are about zeroing in on suspiciousness and things that are odd, but not something that you could really take to court. So we had this hard evidence, but I still didn't understand what was in it for the bad guys. Why are they directing their bot traffic to premium publishers? Digging in, we found that there are a variety of mechanisms that ultimately bring bots in the door. Every major media property sources has multiple mechanisms for sourcing and growing their audience. And on the internet, where everything's interconnected, a lot of those deals take the form of performance-based contracts where ultimately the buyer is paying their downstream affiliate partner or vendor based on how effectively they bring they bring the audience in, which means ultimately that they're paying just by number of visitors. This creates a downstream incentive for everyone past that performance-based deal to goose their numbers with bot traffic. So we see this in countless affiliate deals. We also see this in social media marketing vendors, search engine marketing vendors, companies like audience platforms, all of which end up being kind of middlemen for bot traffic because they're providing pretty much visitors by volume. And even if they're not directly engaging the botnet operators, they have their own downstream partners that they're paying on a performance basis. And when you go downstream, you find that those traffic sources are actually front companies for bot fraud. We've worked with some very large organizations on operations to follow the money and uncover some of the traditional sort of organized crime infrastructure, the offshore bank accounts and the other assets of the criminal dynamics here. And we found that it gets extraordinarily complex because these guys have been evolving really over the past 10 years. Everyone who's not extremely good at hiding in the noise and not good at cloaking the money flows through a host of middlemen have really already died off. And now a new approach is required, I think, to really get under the problem, starting with the data, starting with the actual visitors, in order to uncover who the bad players are, because following the money rapidly becomes untenable because the numbers on the internet are just too big. There are just too many partners, too many middlemen. Lastly, we find that the fraud operators have done really a magnificent job at gaming blacklists and whitelists. It's in everyone's best interest, every part of the criminal ecosystem, for bots to pollute the data models underlying all the analytics companies about what normal traffic looks like. So first of all, as I already pointed out, the bots can clone real consumers. Second, we see bots getting driven around the internet and going to many essentially innocent websites before hitting what we call the cash out point, which is the place that's paying them for the traffic. They're doing this so that they look they look real, and they pick up real visiting cookies from these other sites, sometimes so that they get targeted as consumers with commercial intent, and other times just to mess with the machine learning models of the big internet analytics companies that are really monetizing data mining at this point. If the bot traffic looks normal at that basic layer, then the bad guys will never get caught. And success in that field, success at that level, has really broadened the opportunity for ad fraud to grow to be a multi-billion-dollar crime. Now let me pause for a minute. I hope that I'm popping a few bubbles here. When we first started talking to people in the industry about the numbers that we were finding and how surprising they were, we found a lot of people who understood and readily acknowledged that ad fraud existed and it was a problem, but they assumed that it was happening just on the boundaries of the internet. It wasn't affecting them because they were doing premium ad buys through really smart agencies and really smart trading desks and really smart technology partners that aren't just spraying and praying, but instead are leading highly targeted campaigns where the fraud just shouldn't be possible. And that makes a lot of sense. But one of the things I think defying the logic here is the consistent drop in CPMs, the consistent drop in advertising performance during the exact same time frame where ad targeting has grown substantially more sophisticated, which makes no sense. Like, if any of this technology is really working, then why are ads being less effective and why are CPMs going down? The answer really is the bot traffic. And the answer is that the bot traffic is getting targeted, and the bot traffic is visiting premium websites. This is why fraud hasn't already been squeezed out just by market effects. You'd expect that since bots don't buy things, then with floating prices, bot traffic would get priced increasingly close to zero. What everyone failed to realize is that our adversaries here, criminal operators that are literally making millions of dollars when they succeed, are playing back hard against us. They're actively undermining those data models and those optimizations because they know how the game is played, and they know that when they win, they make millions. So that is why this problem still exists and hasn't just been solved through floating prices and market performance. Next, let me briefly sketch why viewability is not making this problem go away. Bots can fake viewability. The best bots are scripted browsers that are real full HTML5 compliant browsers with cookies and JavaScript enabled and the ability to run Flash, that they look like real visitors. And they have a full technology stack. They're just running in the background on regular people's computers. Regular computers these days are extraordinarily fast, powerful machines that can run a background browser with no one noticing. All of those bots, the really sophisticated bots, look like they're really viewing ads, that they'll check out clean across any vendor's viewability measures. So trying to squeeze out the bot fraud by, through a focus on viewability, we have found is not having the big macro effect that you might expect. It's squeezing out just the really simplistic bots, while the more sophisticated operators are laughing all the way to the bank. The real trouble, the real problem with the way that traffic is monetized that's ultimately making this this problem so immense is that historically there's been no way to distinguish between the real Bob Smith and the bot Smith that's running on the same computer. As it happens, this is a problem that banks have been struggling with now for a few years already. For the past 1,500 years or so, banks have been at the forefront of security spending, as you might guess. And they started seeing a pattern just a few years ago, a shift in the way that bank robbery online was happening, where our criminal adversaries were not trying to break directly into the banks. Right now, the best way to rob a bank is not by trying to compromise a bank's servers. It's by compromising the bank's customers' computers, the computers that are used to log into an online banking website and manage payroll, for instance. What this means from the bank's perspective is that the banking websites cannot trust the computer on the other end of the connection, even when that computer has all of the right security credentials, even when it's the same computer that's been used for online banking before, and even if the other end has all the right passwords and the access codes and everything else. Because the way this crime works is that the malware, the actual criminal programs, lie in wait, basically, until after a real user who wants to log into a bank's systems does so. And then, during the real live banking session driven by a human, the malware changes wiring instructions and sends money out the door in some other way. This is really, really hard to detect because from the bank's security perspective, everything is looking normal. It's all checking out clean. This is the usual computer that payroll is managed out of. The username and passwords was correct. The dongle or the SMS code was correct. It's just that some of the instructions are wrong. This kind of cybercrime is currently the best way to rob banks. The losses due to that model are doubling every year. And what we're seeing out on the internet with advertising systems is the same pattern of flaw, which really comes down to the fact that on the internet you can't implicitly trust the security credentials at the other end of the connection, because those can be copied and reused. There's no easy fix for this. There's no way to upgrade the ad ecosystem to add a new layer of bank quality authentication. And the operators, the kinds of botnets that we're hunting down and shutting down, are really using the same kind of tech stack. So what this means is that the software that they're using to perpetuate ad fraud is the same kind of software originally developed to do this bank fraud, which is at a really high level of sophistication. It's not that there's no easy fix really. That this is kind of a systemic flaw. the fight against fraud has been going on for some time, but there's no, if you will, bad guy Congress. It's not like the criminal groups that we're finding are getting together and comparing notes. What this means is that there's a wide variation in sophistication on the part of these bad guys. This makes the defender's job extraordinarily hard because it's very, very difficult to tell if what you're catching is just the tip of the iceberg or if it's everything. And we've actually seen again and again in this field in particular, trying to squeeze out fraud from the ad ecosystem, that when the bad guys adapt well enough to start defeating all of the defenders' fraud detection systems, we don't see the defenders doubling down and going, oh no, we're getting beaten. It's time to pour more resources into the fight. Instead, the defenders are finding less and less fraud, and they declare victory and go home. Because another way to look at the same data is not, oh wow, we're getting beaten. It's, congratulations, the fraud numbers have dropped. And of course, the overall fraud hasn't dropped at all. In fact, this is a winning condition on the part of the bad guys, not a failure. And that's what we've seen over the past several years. In fact, one of my great hesitations as CEO of WhiteOp in getting into this field is that I don't want to play a game that we're not going to win and win big and win in the long term. Like the last thing that I want to be is a speed bump for cybercrime. So we had to look very carefully and very skeptically at what it takes to not just find some fraud right now, but what it takes to actually win the long-term arms race against an adaptive adversary. And that adversary has a different incentive mix than what we see in the rest of the real world. Like when they win at ad fraud, they make millions of dollars. When the good guys, when the defenders win, they get to keep their IT salaries. This is a huge incentives mismatch, and it's also a big resource mismatch. So in some cases, the playing field is actually stacked in the bad guys' favor, and this is why the problem has gotten so severe. So there's no kind of magic bullet. Data segmentation, audience segmentation has almost fueled the problem. It has not solved the problem. Viewability can be faked. Really, anything digital can be faked. A problem we've been struggling with in cyber warfare circles for several years now. And big data isn't getting the job done because everyone that's bad at hiding in the noise, all the bad guys who don't know how to undermine the data models and win, those guys died off like 5 years ago. The remaining criminal operators, various organized groups, just numbering in probably the hundreds, it's probably less than 1,000 organized crime groups. The ones that have survived are precisely the ones that are wickedly good at hiding in the noise or turning the models against the defenders. So the large-scale big data analytics approach, I think we can declare definitively dead. But there is a way of directly detecting bot traffic, which is how we developed all of the knowledge that I've been able to share with you today. We have been applying a detection technology directly into ad flows, often by embedding our code directly into ads, that can detect the difference between a real human driving a browser and malware driving a fake browser, even on the same computer. And this is a pattern solution that naturally we're also selling to the online banking community. It's where it grew up to find the kind of bank fraud that I sketched for you, and it's also being used by some other customers for various kinds of automation and remote control detection. And in the context of advertising, it directly uncovers the scope of bot fraud with this very high level of precision, where instead of scoring or providing kind of anomaly detection, instead we can break out on a campaign-by-campaign basis or across a whole ad network's properties exactly which impressions were legit and which ones were bogus. However, merely being able to do this does not actually help us achieve our real objective, which is to make this crime unprofitable. We can't just purge some of the criminal operators from this business. We can't just find the easy detect bots. That almost hands money over to the more sophisticated operators at the expense of the less sophisticated. Instead, we have to change the actual dynamics of ad spending in general. And really that means talking to the buy side. It means talking to advertisers about the degree to which the ad buying as a complete ecosystem has been kind of penetrated and gamed by these fraudsters, so that so we can start solving the problem through money, right? And that's how we began this company, and how I began the presentation. We're not just trying to make the computers harder to break into. We're not trying to create just higher walls that will eventually get scaled. Instead, we're looking at how we can stop the money going to organized crime. And what that means is at the very, very top line, not paying for fraudulent impressions anymore, which is very easy to say, but turns out to be surprisingly difficult, since a lot of buys are really just based on simple to manipulate metrics like reach that bots deliver profoundly. So we can increase the technical sophistication of the entire ad ecosystem. We can add this kind of verification procedure, this validation procedure, into the ways that real-time ads are bought and sold, but no one will do so if the advertisers whose money is getting stolen here don't cry out for it, because bots are frankly easy to serve, and they're improving really everyone's bottom lines except for the ad buyers, and in some cases even the ad buyers who are just paying attention to the size of their reach are in some respects being well served by bots. And of course, there's lots of different inefficiencies in the ad ecosystem, right? That this is an inherently squishy exercise that we engage in when we're trying to reach any audience at all. But there's a big difference. There's a categorical difference in type between all of the various ways in which ad campaigns can be made more efficient, and specifically squeezing out the bot traffic, which is that this money is going to organized crime. This is the reason why regular people's computers are being broken into at the scale of millions, because this is the world's most profitable cybercrime. So if we can squeeze out the dollars from ad fraud, if we can make this crime substantially less profitable, it'll have a far-reaching effect on the entire criminal ecosystem, because this is the money that is encouraging the botnets to get bigger, which means it's encouraging these bad guys to break into our computers, regular people's computers. If we take the winnings out, then this means that those criminal operators will have less money to buy new kinds of exploits, to buy the new rootkits, the new forms of crimeware that make that have made the game so sophisticated. So it'll actually have follow-on effects across the whole black market for crimeware if we can cut off these dollars. But to get there, I need more of the buy side basically on our side, saying, hey, this should be a priority, even above the other ways of kind of squeezing out waste and achieving efficiency, because there's a categorical difference here with botnet-mediated ad fraud over everything else. So that's my walkthrough, and I think we have some time for questions. So let's try to turn it over. So the first question I'm seeing is about what I propose as a solution, an actionable solution. And we have some fun ideas here. So let me briefly recapitulate what we're up against. We're not just trying to find the fake mommy blogs hiding out in the long tail, right? Like that's a portion of the problem. It might be the easiest portion to solve because we could start simply identifying all those sites and publicizing them, just as an example. Sunlight really is effective. The bulk of the dollars are getting lost when the fraud is working its way into premium ad buys. And the fundamental two mechanisms that make that such a pernicious problem are, one, the bots look like real people, and two, the bots end up on websites that you don't want to completely blacklist because they're, let's say they're 60% human and 40% bot. So one way of upending that dynamic, without even involving white ops, without any sort of technical solution at all, would be to just add more transparency on the part of publishers about whether and exactly how they source their audience, right? So technically, we can tell if some name brand website is also bringing bots in the door through their search engine marketing, or through their social media campaigns, or through their affiliates, and that's lovely. And of course, I would love a world in which every buyer and seller of advertising bought this service from white ops. But I think we could go awfully far towards that end, simply by through a business process that made publishers expose when they do any traffic sourcing at all. We've certainly had the case now where some big publishers have come to us, have come to White Ops, asking us to examine their traffic, and it's because they're frankly frustrated that they're competing on an even playing field with people who are goosing the numbers with bots. Like if you're a clean player right now, you are being economically disadvantaged. So really clean players want to differentiate themselves from the ones that are sourcing bot traffic, and that's really something that's actionable at the level of the ad buyers that are interfacing with those publishers, asking smart questions about where the audience comes from and pushing for concrete answers.
Are there differences between how bots appear in different media channels, e.g. Google paid search versus display?
Oh, yes. All right, that's an excellent question. So we see a lot of bot traffic that's being driven through, say Google and Facebook because it makes the bots look more legit. And this has nothing to do with Google or Facebook's incentive model. Like I believe that both of those companies are good, honest players that want to be delivering the best performance that they can. And in many cases, we're very friendly with the actual anti-fraud teams at those companies and the work that they're doing. However, because looking at where your traffic is coming from is such an important part of the analytics, and in particular, consumers that appear to be coming from Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Yahoo tend to be valued as being engaged and possibly driven by an active search for something that might be your product. It's simply profitable for bot operators to program the bots to visit a property at one of those domains before then coming to to their victim sites or their cash-out sites. So that has really messed up. It's messed up everyone's analytics because the bad guys are basically intentionally adding noise that throws off the resulting analytics about that advertisers are using to ask where are interesting consumers coming from and which portion of our advertising is leading to an engaged audience, right? It also messes up attribution models and makes it look like the fake audience is really part of the premium target audience. Like really, really broadly, of course, we see much lower incidence of fraud from premium search marketing, like what you're buying from Google search marketing, because there's less of an incentive for the bad guys to mess in those areas. It's not as profitable as say faking video views, and for the most part, bot traffic just kind of follows the money. However, we have seen some really crazy game theory dynamics where, for example, bot traffic it ends up getting driven to certain kinds of Google campaigns or Facebook campaigns, not even for the bot operators to directly make money through affiliate fees, but actually it's to deplete the ad budgets of other advertisers that they're competing for placement with, which is just unreal. It's a special kind of commercial cyber economic warfare where some players, you see this in direct marketing, are actively trying to deplete the ad budgets of their competitors in order to improve their placement, which is just mind-blowing.
Is there any government agency looking at this kind of fraud?
That's a great question. In my view, one of the unsung heroes of the past 10 years is a group at Treasury that I worked with in a past life when I was doing more defense and intelligence work, following the money of terrorist financing. Very much along the same ideas that I'm proposing here today, which is if you just cut off the money, you can have really, really profound effects on the entire the entire process. And those guys are the world's leading experts in tracking international money laundering flows, and are actually the best for dealing with this problem as well, because the actual botnet operators are operating with impunity from offshore. What we found is that the operators themselves are there's a little bit in South America, Argentina and Brazil. There are quite a few in Russia and Eastern Europe, also Israel, India, and China. Those are the real hotspots, and in many cases, you can kind of get as far as those borders, but you're not going to actually catch these guys unless you can motivate local law enforcement to care. And in many cases, if there isn't a local victim, if basically they're just stealing, American dollars, then the locals don't necessarily care. So working with Treasury, pushing the buttons through the international legal community, through Interpol, et cetera, is probably the best bet, and we've certainly been pushing there. But also our observation is that educating the ad ecosystem to cut off the dollars to begin with is actually going to be the bigger and actually the best long-term solution, because even if we could magically catch all of these guys and put them in prison in their local jurisdiction or even or even shift them over here, if the crime is still wildly profitable, then there will just be new entrants all the time. So we certainly do want to create some negative disincentivizing examples, but for the most part, we're not going to win unless we succeed at actually making the crime less profitable. Oh, and excellent question. Can you explain how money actually flows to the criminals through the use of bots? Great. I'm glad this was asked explicitly. So there are two models for getting paid out. Recall that the basic model of fraud is where websites are under the actual direct control of the botnet operators who would direct the traffic to the websites. The way that the money flows in the ad ecosystem goes from the advertisers to often an agency, maybe to a trading desk, to someone that actually then manages the real placements. And then those placements can go through an ad network or an ad exchange, and then ultimately end up on a website, which the industry terms a publisher. That publisher gets a piece of the action. And if the publisher is part of a network, then the publisher is getting a check from the ad network. So in the most basic model of the crime, you set up a bunch of fake websites, you join them all to an ad network, and you get those, you get hundreds of $10,000 checks from the ad network in direct proportion to the amount of traffic that you drove to those websites that are under your control. So that's the super straightforward model of the crime. Things get way more complex when you're looking at the bot traffic that ends up on name brand media sites. Then the money flows much differently. The publisher, of course, is still collecting money based on volume, based on the number of times that it successfully showed an ad to someone. But in this case, the publisher is also paying out money to some third parties. And then those third parties are often the bot washers. They are themselves middlemen who are sourcing traffic from a front company that vends bot traffic. And I'll kind of walk you through a prototypical example. So here's one. Sometimes major media sites are themselves buyers of advertising because they're promoting their editorial content or what have you. You can buy advertising on low-priced pay-per-click ad networks that are effectively just bot washers, that they're middlemen for the bot operators. What it feels like when you buy advertising on finditquick.com or something, one such middleman, is that you are placing highly effective pay-per-click ads that are then going out to a whole bunch of long-tail websites. What's really happening once you give that money over to that vendor, though, is that the vendor is maintaining a kind of bogus network of long-tail websites that they may actively know are being driven by bot networks, or they could just be sort of guilty of not asking very difficult questions about where their traffic comes from. So the bot operators will have their own cash-out sites that are part of the network from this third party. So the checks go from premium publisher to vendor, and from vendor to bot operator. And we also have found that there can be extra middlemen in the way. For example, there are a lot of, have you ever mistyped a URL and ended up at a website that just has a huge number of ads? There are a lot of people who are just domain squatting, and they're making money off of their domains from a bunch of advertising that they're carrying, which just boggles the mind, because how many times have you mistyped a URL, loaded up a web page filled with ads, and actually thought one of them was interesting and clicked on it, right? This should not be a very high volume activity. Well, we've observed in the wild the following thing. Domain squatters operating a whole bunch of such domains, hosting a bunch of ads, and then buying traffic, sometimes buying advertising traffic on pay-per-click ad networks that's really, really cheap, and making money. So they're essentially just traffic arbitrageurs. They spend a certain amount of money to basically source their bot traffic from one of these bot middlemen. And some portion of that traffic magically clicks on the ads of the domain squatter. So if you're a premium advertiser, then you're seeing that some of your ad traffic is actually coming from these domain squatting URLs. And it sort of makes sense. You're like, okay, couple percentage points, yeah, I could kind of see that. And so these domain squatters have the effect of being kind of bot washers. They're like washing the traffic because it makes sense enough that when you see that some of your traffic is coming from those sources, you're like, okay, sure. And as long as those middlemen are making slightly more money from their ad impressions or clicks than the money that they're using to source the traffic, they're happy just as middlemen, and they have the effect of making the origin of the traffic to the ad ecosystem look different than it really is, which is actually these bogus PPC networks, where everyone would cry foul if the bogus PPC networks were directly responsible for huge volumes of traffic, as they are. But since it's going through these very large number of bot washers, it ends up looking like legit long-tail traffic.
Well, with that, I think we've reached the end of our hour, so I think we're going to leave it there. Michael, thank you for joining us today. A very informative discussion on a problem that I know is not on the radar screen of a lot of advertisers, but probably should be. So thank you for joining us, and for everybody else for participating.